Now, a simple way to remember this is to write this down in using algebra. If I start with let's say a number A, this could be the thickness of book. The number B, right, this could be the thickness of another book. Now, and this value has an error, so plus or minus some error. Now one way to represent error is to use this little triangle here. This little triangle stands for delta. Let's see. Now, I'm going to use the small letter delta instead. I'll use this symbol. Now, this symbol is the Greek letter for D, which is called delta. D-E-L-T-A, delta. Now, I'll call it delta A. Now, in mathematics, we normally use the Greek letter delta as a symbol to represent a small change. Now, in this case, delta A would be a small change in A, and we think of that as an error of A. In the same way, I'm going to write delta B for the error of B. So in the case of the measurements just now, that would be my delta A, and that would be my delta B, for example. Now, if I want to add the two numbers, okay, so I'm going to say, right, I'm going to add them. I'm going to say, let C be the sum of A and B. So if I want to add A and B, say that adding the thicknesses of the book, it gives me an answer C. But C would have an error, and that error, the error in C, would be given by a certain, or we can just call it delta C, right? That would be the error in C. But the question is, what is the error in C? Right? So just like when we added the thicknesses of the two books, we wanted to know what is the error of this answer. Well, and from what we have learned, we can simply add the two errors to find the error. So therefore, to find the error of C, we should find delta C by adding together the separate errors of A and B. So I can say that delta C is equal to delta A plus delta B. Delta A plus delta B. So that gives us a formula for finding or for combining the errors in the case where we have to add two readings. So let me just sketch the connection. Alright, so if we want to add two readings, this is how we find the error. Now, in the case where we have in this case we have two numbers which are added together. Now, in the case, there's another case where we can have two numbers that are multiplied together. So let's take a look at that. Now, suppose in this case that A and B are to be multiplied together. So it's A times B. And let's say the answer is C. C again. Now, let's think about a situation where we can have A times B to give us C. It can, for example, be, say when we have an area, if I have a rectangle, for example, a rectangle. Now, one side of the rectangle might be A, and the other side might be B, and then C in this case would be the area. So now we naturally have such an equation. Now suppose that this is a piece of paper and I measure the length of the paper and the width of the paper. And each of these measurements would have a certain error, maybe plus or minus 0.5, depending on what kind of ruler I use. So in any case, all right, each of these will have an error. Let me call it delta B, and the length error would be delta A. So plus or minus delta A plus or minus delta B. So therefore, if I measure these two sides and get the readings A and B, maybe in some millimeters, and I multiply them to get the area, my answer must also have some error. But how do I find this error? Now in this case, it turns out that I cannot just simply add them. Now previously, I can simply add them because each of these are obtained by adding the error. Right, each of these, the bigger of the two values, are obtained simply by adding the two errors. And then when we plug them into this sum, we would actually be adding the errors directly. But in this case, it is a little bit different. And what we need to do in this case is to think about the effects that these errors have on the area. Now, this is how we do it. Now, this error, we can imagine, in order to find the error in C, we would really want the biggest possible value of C when A and B have the biggest possible value as a result of the error. The biggest possible value simply mean for A, it would be A plus delta A. So let's say delta A is here, alright? So delta A would be this long, and let's say delta B is this long. Okay, so that's the length of my delta B, and that's the length of my delta A. So let's draw the corresponding area. Now the corresponding area would be this. Now I'm just going to draw a dotted line here. Now the result of having a delta A here is to increase the area of C by a certain fraction, which is given by this. And the effect of having a delta B there is to increase C by that fraction. Alright, so therefore, the total increase in the area of C would be the fractional increase in the area of C, let me call it delta C, would be by this fraction plus that fraction. And this fraction is simply delta A over A, delta A over A, and that fraction up there would be delta B over B. And here, then we have a formula for the error when we multiply two numbers.